Hey folks, it's David back again with another video. Welcome back to Red, Gold, and Blue Nation movies. I know it's been a long time, years since I made a movie review video. And I wanted to get started again with this one. This movie really, really made me think it's worthwhile again. In the Heart of the Sea is... well, it's restored my faith in film. I enjoyed the film that much. And I want to go ahead and say thank you to some people. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to Ron Howard for directing this movie. Thank you to Chris Hemsworth, Benjamin Walker, Cillian Murphy. Thank you to Tom Holland and Brendan Gleeson. This film really... well, we'll just say it touched me there. And I'm going to go ahead and go into a ramble mode, even more so than I always have, to just try and get all of my thoughts and feelings about this film out there. I was expecting, not really understanding what I was going in for when I watched this film, to be the Moby Dick story, obviously, but that's not what it is. It's supposed to be the real life events back of the inspiration for Herman Melville's novel, and it kind of blew me away. The things that these men, these whalers, went through had a way of giving me some perspective. Granted, this was a disastrous voyage the Essex went on, but still, it helped. There's something very humbling about it, particularly at the end. After all that, I want to make sure I get his name right, that it is Nickerson. I almost said Nicholson. No, it's Nickerson, Thomas Nickerson, who is played young version by Tom Holland, and the older man who narrates the story, Brendan Gleeson. Well, actually, he doesn't narrate the story. He tells... He tells the story of what happened to Herman Melville's character, and I didn't understand why he was so reluctant until the very end. That part of the movie's played up very well, and I'll get to that, as to why he was so reluctant in the beginning of the film when Herman Melville, played, I think, very well by Ben Whishaw. Something about his voice, Ben's voice in this movie, just makes me think of, well, basically the voice of the 19th century. Every time I see or hear a film, but maybe about the Civil War or something like that, that accent that he has, you'll only understand what I mean when you if you watch the film and you listen to Ben Wishaw's Herman Melville. So yeah, I didn't understand why Brendan Gleeson's character was so reluctant and ashamed of something about the story of what happened with the Essex, but you understand at the very end, and it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing. The visual effects are really great. It has a way of really taking you back to that time, and I was so out of it. I don't know why I thought the film at the beginning had said 1850. No, David, it's much earlier. It's around 1820s time frame. It's much further back. Oh yeah, and that takes me back to the point I was trying to say a moment ago. The things people go through, the struggles, and why they go through them. And obviously this is a harrowing adventure these whalers ended up being taken on, and obviously not every whaling vessel was attacked by some monstrous sea creature or whale. No. What they went through, and then at the end, as Nickerson and Melville are parting, Nickerson having told him the whole story all through the night, and it's dawn. It's the morning time, the sun's rising when Melville leaves, and he says, "Is it true? What I've recently heard, they've discovered oil under the ground." and Melville's like saying something like, I believe so, I've heard the same thing. And it's such a thing. It is such a thing that that they put that in there, that Ron Howard put that in there, that, or whoever the decision was, that all that they went through, and all so many went through, and so many whales died. They said something like 400,000 whales were killed for oil in that heavy whaling period, trying to get what would make them money, trying to get what lit the cities. That what Herman Melville actually says in the opening lines narration of the film, in a really haunting little clip of him saying that. I'll go ahead and read. Let me read it. It'll be fun. Quotes. This is the first line. Herman Melville in his letter. How does one come to know the unknowable? What faculties must a man possess? Since it was discovered that whale oil could light our cities in ways never achieved before, it created global demand. It has pushed man to venture further and further into the deep blue unknown. We know not its depths, nor the host of creatures that live there. Monsters, are they real? And then this huge whale passes by, and if you look closely at it, it's conspicuous. There's huge scars from harpoons on its back. This massive sperm whale just kind of ghostily going through the water, and then he disappears again. And then Herman's voice again. Or do they exist only to make us respect the sea's dark secrets? Perfect beginning of this film. Perfect. And then he visits Nickerson. And in the course of the story, I remember Brendan Gleeson saying that a couple of the people were still alive even then, when he had survived to old age and was telling the story. When Ben Winshaw's character, Herman Melville, gets there, Nickerson is so reluctant to tell him the story. For whatever reason you don't really understand. He's obviously spending a lot of time in the bottle, and it's his wife who convinces Ben Winshaw's Herman Melville to stay. And then she makes Nickerson tell the man the story, because Melville was going to pay, 3 months lodgings, rent, money, which obviously would have helped out her household. And so she's like, who works around here? Who takes care of you? You're going to do this. And so it's another neat scene in the film, how Herman Melville finally gets the goods from Nickerson. Nickerson says, what do you want to hear, man? He says, I want to hear about the whale. I want to hear about what happened on the Essex. What happened? I want to hear it from you. And that's the beginning, and it's so well done. There's not a lot of, at least that I can recall, and it's been over a month since I watched the film. I meant to make this little review back then, but I didn't, because I thought I couldn't do it justice. But here I am, ended up doing a rambler anyways. But yeah, this film is worth it. I wanted to see this film back in 2015 when it came out at the theater. There was something about it. I thought, hey, I kind of like Chris Hemsworth as Thor. This could be entertaining, and I like period pieces. Well done, big budget, well done period pieces. I love it. I love this stuff. But I didn't see it for whatever reason. It just didn't happen. And my mom rented this from the library, free. I waited until midnight to start watching it. So it's all dark in my living room when I see this, to get that theater experience, to burn it all in my mind. So that's why I like watching films at the theater. I usually don't rewatch movies a lot after I see them at the theater, because it's like it's etched in my mind after seeing it in the dark theater. That's how I feel about it anyways. Anyway, sorry, the phone rang, so I had to pause this review. Anyways, back to it. Some memorable things about the film. The opening, memorable scenes, that is. I'll never get over Tom Holland and his hesitant way, his being scared to go into the whale that they catch, because he was still basically a kid. really small stature at that point, and so Chris Hemsworth's like, "Kid, get down there. Yeah, you're gonna get down there, do your job." He makes him go down into the well to get all of the oil that the taller guys couldn't get to, and it was just horrible, and it was memorable. And then Brendan Gleeson as Nickerson, they cut back to him talking about it, and he talks about the first time is the whatever, and how many barrels of oil that he got out of it and everything. The relationship between the captain. I want to read something here that I'm looking at right now on IMDb. I thought this was interesting. Goofs. This falls under the goofs here on IMDb. It says, while the film depicts Owen Chase as older and more experienced than Captain George Pollard, Pollard was in fact older, being 29 when Essex sailed to Chase's 23. While Essex was Pollard's first captaincy, he had actually been serving as an officer aboard her for 8 years of highly successful and lucrative whaling voyages. The tension between the two men, was significantly played up for the film. That is interesting, and I'm glad I read that, assuming this is legitimate, that this is true. Chris Hemsworth looks like he could pass for younger or older, depending on what he needs for a film. He's got that kind of face. They did in the film make out like Captain George was very green. His father, wow, what a trip. He has this scene where he says, never let them, the crew, forget that you are their superior. Never let them forget that, because you are their superior. And it's like, you can see he's almost being set up for failure by what's being put in his head by his dad. Yeah, you're the captain and you're in charge and there's great responsibility, but he he wanted him to go about it in this heavy-handed way, which he did in the film, making them sail into a storm that almost capsizes them until Owen Chase, played by Chris Hemsworth, has them go straight through it because it's too late to turn, which the captain also wanted them to do when he realized what a boo-boo he had made in his arrogance. He actually has this line where he says, if the men can't handle it, the men need to be baptized by a storm. If they can't handle this little bit of water, then God help us all. I'm like, man, really? So Chase really gets them out of that. Had to cut off part of the ship to save themselves, and then the captain wants him to apologize, wants Chase to apologize, and to get ready to resign when they're turning right around. He says to go back to port, and Chase is like, you made us sail into that storm, not me. And the captain, he's so impetuous, he's so impulsive, rather. He snaps on him. He slams his fist down on the desk. Your impudence, and it's a great scene. It's well acted, in my opinion. I liked him as the captain too. Benjamin Walker. His part in this is very interesting because they have that tension. Maybe it is played up for the sake of the story, but imagine that. Imagine being on a ship. If two men really hate each other, or can't stand each other at any rate, as much as, because one's like an alpha, Chase, who in the film is depicted as being more experienced, the men look up to him, literally. When they're first setting sail, something goes wrong, and he climbs up to the top of the mast himself to fix it, and even the captain's looking on like, wow, that's really impressive. He doesn't say it, but everybody's like, Chase, because he's the first mate, when he's basically screwed in the beginning out of his captaincy. And you can see his own conflict with his wife and how sad it is that he's going to sea maybe 1, 2, 3 years, who knows how long it takes, to get enough whale oil, to do enough whaling in all that time, to actually make the voyage cost effective, actually make the money they're sent to make, get the oil. Get the oil. She wants to support him, but at the same time, it's like she's hesitant. She doesn't really want him to go because recently a vessel came back missing 3 of the crew it went out with. And she's expecting a baby. He's probably not going to be there when the child is born and all this stuff. It's high stakes living. Something else that made me appreciate this stuff much more. High stakes living. 3 years at a time. Gone from your family? No thanks. But they did it. And they did it on wooden vessels. And they had to harpoon the whales themselves. You got to have a strong arm, man. I'm telling you. Tom Holland's character, again, a kid, even before Spider-Man, he looks even younger than he does now, obviously. He says, "What are those?" As he's like swabbing the decks or working the docks or whatever, they're preparing for the ship, his next voyage. And his friend says, "Oh, those are whaling pins." He asks, "How do you get one?" And some guy says, "You gotta throw a spear through the heart of the largest, most ferocious animal in the sea," or something like that. And he says, "I shall have 12 of those one day." And you just, it puts you there. It puts you there in the scene and the spirit of that time and what their job was. And it really was something to see Cillian Murphy wearing one of those pins. He plays the character of Matthew Joy. And Matthew Joy's character is also interesting. He's obviously had a hard time getting away from the bottle. He keeps one with him the whole movie, but he never opens it, never drinks from it, and you're like, you can almost feel his plight too. I liked his character, the friendship with Chase. But going back to that scene, imagine that. Imagine after they come through that storm, how these 2 guys can't stand each other. One's an alpha, all these guys look to him. They don't know this new captain. And maybe in real life, just like this little bit of information on IMDb says, he had been serving and on the Essex for 8 years. When they come together like that, if one man who knows his stuff, and then there's this other person who artificially, in this case the captain's, he's got to prove himself, and then he makes a bad decision right off the bat, it's like a disaster for a captain to make that kind of mistake. When he slams his fist down on the desk and says, "You're impudent," it's like, you will, that decision was sound. But Chase, to go through the storm, Chase says, "We don't want to be around each other any longer than we have to." And he persuades him, "Let's just go out and let's find some whales, get the oil, get home, so we don't have to be around each other anymore." And that basically sets the scene, because instantly, the next scene, it says something like 14 months later or something like that. Like over a year. You can't do over a year with somebody on board like that. You would have to cool your jets. You would have to... There's too many combustible elements just from that scene. So maybe it is a little played up for the film, but it did the trick. It made you understand their relationship. If in fact it's historically accurate as far as them not really getting along, like opposing forces there, because Nickerson, when he begins telling the tale to Melville, says, I don't know if he says it's not so much about the whale, but he said the statement. He said, the story of the Essex is the story of her captain, George Pollard, and the first mate, Owen Chase. And so you're getting ready right then, right from that little point of dialogue from him, that this is going to be kind of a personal story. It's going to be about people. And it is, man, let me tell you. The whale it's there, it's impressive, you understand its presence, it's this menacing force up against these humans. And even Owen Chase, Chris Hemsworth, has this moment of reflection when they're stranded on on the island that they come to after the whale has destroyed the ship and they've had to abandon it, and they're just floating at sea trying to survive. But when they come to this island, the whale attacks them again. And Chase has this scene. He says, "He's followed us!" And the whale actually knocks these guys into the air, destroying one of the little boats. Maybe some of the men died from that, but the rest get to shore. Chase has this scene where he says, "Is it our greed? Is it our will to? Is it something we've done?" And Captain George Pollard, Benjamin Walker, has this line. He says, "There's nothing wrong here except the whale." He has this great, really well written line about how we're made in the image of God, given dominion over this, to subdue the earth, to build for ourselves. It's really well written, and it's really, really well said by him in that part of the movie. But I'll tell you what, it's because I saw this film and it was a little after 2 when I went to bed. I went straight to bed after seeing this film. I had a dream. I don't even count it as a bad dream or a nightmare. It was just a dream that I know was because of this movie. It was, the only person in it was, in my dream, was Matthew Joy, played by Cillian Murphy. Not that it was even Matthew Joy, it was Cillian Murphy in my dream. And it was because of this really haunting scene in the movie. They see land, and then they're at this island. It's apparently deserted. There are only little. It's not even filmed as though it's a continuation of anything. It's just random snippets of, like, Nickerson finds some water. He drinks from a little cliff, drizzling. Somebody finds some bird eggs. I'm trying to remember what they said it was. Quail eggs, and just eats them straight up, shell and all. He's so hungry because they've been starving at sea. And Joy, Matthew Joy, played by Cillian Murphy, had already had a knock to his head, and Chase was afraid it might actually be mortal. Like, can you see his brain or something? I didn't really fully understand that scene, but Matthew Joy saying, "He's all right, I'm all right," and he has this crazy look in his eyes, and as he grabs Chase and he says, "I'm all right, okay." Well, when Chase discovers this cave that he shows them, you don't know why he starts crying, except maybe it's all just gotten to him. No, he shows them some corpses that had been there for a long time. Long time. Or maybe not so long. You don't know. You just know. And he explains to them, they starved to death. Nobody comes to this little island. And when the quail realize that their eggs are gone, they won't be coming back either. We won't even have birds to try and feed on to try and survive here. And so it's like there's this. It's like a punch in the gut to finally have made it out of the sea. They're starving. Everybody's looking so thin and sickly, and then he has to tell them that. And they're getting back in their boats, and there's this scene, great scene, like profile shot, like from the side of Matthew Joy and Chris Hemsworth, Owen Chase, when Cillian Murphy's character, Matthew Joy, is telling him, there's no point. There's no point. As he's trying to get him to get into the boat to go, but he's so thin, he's so weak. They're starving to death. Two or three of the other crew and Matthew Joy stay behind. And when they part ways, when Owen Chase says to Matthew Joy, "I'll see you again, and we'll play cards like we used to at the whatever meetup in Massachusetts that they used to go to," and Matthew Joy says, we will, knowing that he doesn't have long. He's got his bottle by him and he still hasn't opened it. And to see one of the crew members, and I couldn't help but think about the coming Civil War when I saw these 2 or 3 black crewmates on the ship. Only one has a little bit of dialogue at one point, but it's like a side character. When they get back in the boat, to see everybody looking at each other, knowing this is it. This is it. They get back in the boat, and they drift on. They try and sail out, not knowing really where they are, except by the stars and by where their last location was when the whale took them out. And that's another thing, when they went out there whaling, and you really identify somehow with Tom Holland's character, Thomas Nickerson, because he's completely green. He's never done this. He's experiencing it for the first time, killing the whale. And so are you, as you're with him. They harpoon a whale, and that rope's going so fast that it tears the skin off his palms. He's like, oh, my hands, my hands. He's bleeding. And for whatever reason, they made this first kill so intense. Owen Chase, played by Chris Hemsworth, he's done this numerous times over the years, right? And yet they slow it down, and they let you really see it. And the agony of the whale. I didn't realize how the process worked. They harpoon it, and then it has to drag the rope through the water, and they got so much rope. And it's going, and it's going, and it's going, and it's going. And the guy's like, we're going to run out of rope. He says, go ahead and hook up the next boat. And so they hook it up, and it starts taking all that rope. It's going, it's going, it's going, and this whale is swimming and swimming. And it's so intense with the music and the emotion. And seeing the blood and the water. And then it's like this is how it works. The whale eventually just kind of gives way. Gives out and dies. And Owen Chase and Thomas Nickerson, Chris Hemsworth and Tom Holland, they got these expressions on their face like, man, this is intense. And Tom Holland, his face is like, this is what it takes. This is what it's all about. And you're just seeing somebody experience something that intense for the first time, a job that just is hard and is intense. And again, the suffering of the whale, they swim, and it's like something was happening that doesn't usually happen, the way they filmed it, and the way how far out this whale managed to go. And so they got that one, and then apparently they didn't have very much fortune in finding any more. Until they go to this port, or this island, and there's a Spanish fisherman who looks like he's been traumatized by something. And he tells them about this place and this location where there are hundreds, thousands, he says, of these whales. And that's where they encounter this enormous sperm whale. Obviously the Moby Dick from the novel. But he tells them calls him a white demon and all the trouble. And he actually recounts part of the story of what happened to him and his ship. And Matthew Joy, played by Cillian Murphy, is like, he makes some sarcastic, smart aleck remark. He says, did the guy also pick your pocket too, or something like that? And this guy looks at him like, good luck to you, or something. And he just walks out. Interesting scene. It really sets the tone for like something might be up. They're going to encounter something, and you already know it's going to be the whale. But going back to what my dream was about, because literally I watched this movie and I went to bed, and that's why I had this movie. And I had some pretty intense thoughts and feelings rolling because of what was in the movie. You know what, let me go ahead and go a little bit further. When the survivors of the survivors of the survivors get back in the water, almost immediately one of the guys dies. Starvation, disease at sea, he's just kind of giving out. And you can see he's lifeless, he's dead. He's in the boat that Owen Chase is in, and one of the crew, there's only like 4 guys in there, 5. Chris Hemsworth is Owen Chase, young Tom Nickerson, and 3 other crewmen. And one of them dies. And you're like, oh man, this is really happening. They're just going to be dying in the boat. One of the other crewmen immediately starts putting together a big cloth, going to sew up the body and admit his body to the ocean. Like an at-sea burial, the way they did. And Owen Chase stops him. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, sir, I'm gonna put his body to sea. He's like, no. And he has this line, I wish I could remember it verbatim, but I can't. But he basically says that no seaman, unless he's a fool, would... I don't know if he says unless he's a fool, but he basically says he would never throw away something that would help keep him alive if he had any hope. And, man, I'm not doing justice to that line at all. Maybe I can find it here on IMDb. Basically, he's getting at, we're going to use his body for something. And maybe you don't understand it right away. But basically, they're going to eat the remains of that particular sailor who's just died. And there's this look of disbelief, and then this kind of like sad, horrific thought and feeling that just kind of flows as Tom Holland's character, Nickerson, again, he's a kid, basically. He starts to cry, and the film fades with the music, and then it cuts to the other boat where Captain George Pollard is, and his cousin, I believe played by Frank Dillons, Henry Coffin, I think, unless I'm getting this totally wrong. Everybody's starving. They draw straws. One of them is actually going to go ahead and end it. And the straw, George Pollard, the captain, draws the straw, and then his cousin's like, no, we'll draw again. And George is like, no, cousin, no. And keep in mind, this cousin had been kind of a knothead earlier in the book. Earlier in the film, because he threatened to shoot Chase, blaming him. You're the cause of our troubles. You put us here. Admit it. And Chase never would admit it. He wanted to shoot him so bad until George Pollard finally said, Henry. Like trying to get him to come to himself, and Henry's crying as he puts the pistol away. He had actually gotten onto him earlier in the film for using his family name to try and get out of trouble or try and advance himself over others, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Henry is the one holding the pistol as George says, you have to do it, cousin. You have to do it. And he's like, he can't do it. He can't do it. He says, like, please forgive me. You don't know what he's thinking. He kills himself. He kills himself, and the pistol falls in the water. And George is like, no, because he was going to do it. He was going to sacrifice himself. And almost immediately, the crew, they have knives, and it doesn't show anything, obviously, of course, but they're going to eat the remains of Henry Coffin. Which is just, it's like you're there. It's like you're there. This movie has an immersive effect to it, and it's just, it's really, really powerful to me. And the thing is, when they're drifting at sea, before they drift apart, the boats, a ship comes by, and you're almost thinking, did I really just see that? Because this big boat, which could have rescued them, comes along, and I don't know if maybe you can see some of the remains of a body or something. I guess that's what it was. My mom had seen the movie. She said, oh, it's like there were bones in the boat or something. But I just don't remember seeing that part. And I never left the film. Anyways, this ship, this captain sees it and he says, God have mercy. That they basically committed cannibalism. And lets them float on. He does not get them out of the water. He does not rescue them. And it hits you again. What is happening? What they've done. What they had to do. But also how it was viewed at the time as abomination. And then it cuts back to the elder Nickerson telling the story years later. Brendan Gleeson breaking down in tears. He tried to get him to go away. He tried to get him, Herman Melville, just get out of here. I've told you enough. There's something he doesn't want to say. There's something he just doesn't want to talk about. He gets angry and he's ashamed over it. And then you finally realize this is what it is when they have when they talk more. And again, this is in the narration part where he's talking with Herman Melville. And he says, well, what are you afraid of? What are you And he goes back to this part of the movie at the beginning where Nickerson actually says, "Have you ever read Hawthorne, Mr. Nickerson?" "Oh, now there's a writer. Very good." And there's Melville like, "Indeed he is. But he is not here, and I am." And it's like, so that's that. And then he actually tells him when he says, "Well, what are you afraid of?" later in the film. He says, "I'm afraid of failing, because I'm not Hawthorne." And he gets really, really personal with him. And he finally makes him understand how important to him that telling Nickerson's story is. And you just, again, it's really well done. And his wife comes in and consoles him. It's like, "You could have told me what happened all those years ago. You could have told me even about what you had to do to stay alive. And I would have still loved you." And it's really well done. And when they pick up from there, they're drifting apart. Well, before the boats drift apart, the whale visits them again. And it's this unbelievable scene where he's coming right at them, and they muster just enough strength. There's George Pollard saying, "You've got the better position, Mr. Chase." He tosses him these harpoons look like they're 8 or 10 feet long. I'm sure they're not quite that long. But man, they're big, and they must be heavy to pierce through a whale. And the whale comes up, and basically, in this really amazing scene, he just kind of stops at him, and he rolls over on his side. You can see the eye of the whale looking at Chase, and the music's going, and Pollard screaming, "Kill him! Kill him! Put it through his heart!" And Chase is just looking at the whale and looking at the whale. And you're just wondering if maybe between the physical reality, maybe he just doesn't have enough strength, or maybe it's mental and emotional, and something he's learned in all of this. You don't fully know, and that's something else that just makes you think. It makes you think. And he's just holding the harpoon and holding the harpoon until the whale just kind of flips over, and he goes on. And he kind of peacefully just vanishes into the distant waters under the sea, and it's like, you know he's not coming back now. You know he's not going to torment them anymore. And then there's Pollard. He's draped his starving body over the side. He's looking at Chase. He's like, "You're a fool." It's just great. It's a great scene. Great scene. They drift apart, and finally, on the verge of complete starvation, I admit it, I thought Chris Hemsworth's character Owen Chase was dead. That's how motionless and how lifeless his body looked. When Nickerson is trying to wake him up, Tom Holland, "Wake up, wake up, wake up," because he realizes they've drifted all the way into some mainland area, and they're going to be alright. Like, they got to get somebody's attention. They need help. They need food. And so he had said that after the boats parted, that they never saw Captain George Pollard's boat again. Which you're thinking, it's so sad. It's like continuous hits to you, because especially if you don't know the story, which I'm glad I went in cold. I'm glad I didn't research anything. I'm glad I just wanted to watch this movie, because this movie is what's introduced me to all this, and it really hit me. It did, in a really good way. He had survived, George Pollard. You see him at the end and stuff. But let me go back a moment and really finally get the thoughts out about that dream that I had after watching this movie. I dreamed a dream that I don't even call a. It was just thoughts. That's all it was. An image of Matthew Joy, played by Cillian Murphy, on that island with 4 or 5 starving crewmen. In the same way they had cast lots in George Pollard's boat. In my dream, it's like they were saying, "Okay, who will eat today?" And oh, it's so-and-so's turn. And even in my dream, there's like some talking. Cillian Murphy's talking like, I forget the exact words, but he actually like cuts the flesh from the palm of his hand. And so that's what I was thinking about from my dream. Guys just gradually cutting off in this morbid but necessary existence. This like cutting off maybe a little bit more of your arm each day and letting others sustain themselves from you, and like tears and sacrifice, and just, this is how it is. It's just sadness. Will we ever be rescued? We don't know. But here, have some, basically. Let me sustain you. You're in the same position I am. It was all bound up in my mind as I went to get to bed, I guess, and that's why I had this really weird dream. Yeah, that's what I dreamed, literally. That haunting scene of them saying goodbye and him not opening up his bottle. He's still resisting. He's not gonna go back to it, to the bottle. Anyway, like I said, it is great. It is great. And obviously I'm going to put spoilers in the title of this video because I've gone and said everything. At the end, when they're back and everything, the owners of this whaling company actually want Chase to lie about what happened. I forget if they wanted him to say it was a storm or something else. They don't want him to talk about the whale. They don't want him to say anything about it. And there's George Pollard also. He's back in his captain uniform duds. And it's really something. He says, it's not the truth. The truth is that the Essex was, I forget what the word is, stoved? Basically destroyed by a white whale. And the crew had to commit abomination to stay alive, he said. And he says, he's talking about not dishonoring the memories of all the crew that were lost. Because there's only like maybe half a dozen survivors. If that, or maybe a little more. And he said, I won't lie about it. And he says, and neither should you, George. And after all they've been through together, they don't hate each other anymore. But it's like, yeah. They wanted him to lie, and then George, when he come time to testify to like a public hearing for the company, because the only way the company couldn't lose a lot of money, basically, and also, I think make some money on some insurance or something, whatever, was if they went along with this cooked up story that was basically a lie. He tells the truth. George tells the truth, and you can see everybody like, because he's just publicly declared what happened to these people who, the lawyers and the insurance people and the law, whatever. And his own dad is like, he's like infuriated that he didn't lie about it, and it's another great scene. But you see where George is at that point, his character. Integrity, honor. Which, it finally rung home with me that he always was that way. But his need to, how do you say it, form over substance, or making sure that he wanted to do a good job as a captain. But in this film, it's portrayed as though he just wasn't ready. And so the mechanical part of, you got to do what I say, and I'm the captain. At the end, you see he's a very decent man, and he's going to be he's a good captain. Nickerson narrates how he actually went back to the same place to try and find the whale, because he wanted to get that whale that did all that to them. Like, looked around for like 2 years or whatever, but he never found him. He never found the whale again. Which is just another thing that makes you think in terms of, it was about them. It was about them, their experience, their lesson, their growth, their adventure. Their lives, because so many of them lost their lives. Anyway, Nickerson, young Nickerson, he gets with Owen Chase. He tells him how much he appreciates him, and he's going to be going out on some other vessel and stuff. And Owen Chase sees his daughter. It's so well done. It looks so good, and you really feel it. And so I guess what have I failed to mention? Maybe I could have talked about the scene, Owen Chase, Chris Hemsworth, talking to his wife about, she makes this statement about how his dad was a dreamer. He says, and what's so bad about that? He wanted to do things for his family, and he talks about how hard his dad worked in his life so that he could have something, and how he wanted to do the same thing, and how ticked off he was at the beginning of the film when they were supposed to give him his captaincy. Then he was going to be in charge of a vessel and go out, but no, they were going to put George Pollard in charge of the Essex. He says, don't you love this language? The guy says, that promise must unfortunately be deferred. It's like, a promise is a promise, guy. And he walks out on him. They say, but we'll pay you this much. And then he realizes it's more money than ever. And he says, well, I'll take it in writing. He tells his wife, well, the words of a liar on paper are still just the words of a liar. So he doesn't really trust these guys. So that's the mentality. That's how things are. That's his mindset as he goes out. And you're thinking, I wouldn't want to go out and work for a bunch of guys who were doing me wrong, but he had to. And so this is frustration compounded with the emotion of the parting from his wife. And that scene, as it kind of lingers on her for a moment, in a really good scene, it all looks good. And the narration of this preacher, as he's talking about, Lord bless our species with the continued search for those things. It's really well done. You don't even see the preacher. You just see a bunch of people huddled around these candles and understand. It's another scene that helps you understand the importance of the whale oil at that time. That's what was going on. That's what they used, and that's where it was at. It was so much about the whales and how these guys are basically heroes for getting it done, for helping to basically, just like that preacher said, advance the species. It's really something. It really puts you there. It really does. And I say thank you to Ron Howard again. I like several of Ron Howard's movies. This one's top tier as far as I'm concerned. It's so well done. It's beautiful, and it's really worth a watch. I know I've said a lot about it, but it's not the same as actually seeing it for yourself and hearing it. I wish I could keep talking about this film. That's what it meant to me. But it's basically, like I said, it's restored my faith in film and what film can do. And I hope you'll watch it. And let me go ahead and shut this down, guys. I appreciate you listening to me, especially if you listen to all of this. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again.